Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Today we have the most special guest of all. 1,000 years from now, people will be looking back and seeing what Hans-Josef Fell started when he started the solar industry pretty much. 1,000 years from now, we will say that he cooled off the planet probably by about 10 degrees, probably saved at least 10,000 species, probably saved a whole bunch of jobs, and did all kinds of great stuff. I was lucky enough at Intersolar in Germany not too long ago to meet Hans-Josef on the floor, and then shortly after that evening I went to dinner with the Clean Tech Business Club, which is an awesome club that you should join, and I was sitting right next to Hans-Josef Fell himself. I'm very honored. He was a member of the German parliament and pretty much started the solar industry by starting the Feed-in-Tariff. That's the FIT. Half the solar in the world for quite a while, especially when I started the solar industry, was installed in Germany, probably mostly because of Hans-Josef Fell. So thanks, Hans-Josef. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Sean, for inviting me. And it is a great pleasure for me to be with you and to speak about the history and the future for solar and all other renewable energies.
Yeah, and it was great meeting you. And you have a twinkle in your eye. It was like I was just meeting a superhero there that day. And yeah, so I'm interested in just how the feed-in tariff started.
Oh, it is a long history. In my mind, it started in the beginning of the 90s, last century. But to promote renewable energies and solar is longer before. In the 70s, you remember there was the first thinking for renewable energies in the world around the situation when we had the Yom Kippur War in Palestine and Israel in 1972. This war was very strange. The OPEC cut the oil consumption and the oil demand for the world, and we had a big lack of oil and high oil prices. And then my thinking was, why do we need oil? We have solar radiation in abundance. We have a lot of them, 10,000 times more than we need energy as a whole humankind in the world. I would love to have this energy on a technology view, cheap for the whole world. And in the same time, we had the report of Club of Rome with a limited of resources. And this strengthened my mind. And since this time, I worked only for renewable energies. First in my house, I implemented a solar house with solar radiation, heating up my house in glass and with a heating collector. And in 1991, I invested the first solar PV in my house. And it was a revolution. Nearly all medias came and make photographs and what is a crazy man. Solar PV is the most expensive electricity what we have on the world. He is building up on his house. He must be a rich man. No, I wasn't. I was a teacher and had to finance my 3 children and my wife and to finance back my house, and it was possible. And in this time in 90, we is wide society with grassroots movement for solar on decentralized level in villages, in towns who wanted to support solar because of to avoid climate protection and to phase out nuclear. Both.
Do you know that system that you put on your house in 1991? Like, what kind of system was it? Does it still exist? Do you still have the equipment?
Yes.
It's still working?
It is not exactly that one, because it was one of the first panels, a 1.8 kilowatt photovoltaic system. But the company who produced it made bad panels, and I had to remove the panels in 1998. But since his time, 7 years, it works.
So you have the same 1998. Do you remember what brand, the 91 and the 98?
Oh, the brand, all companies went bankrupt. They do not exist.
Like I know that I have some old Arco modules from around that time that actually work great.
Yeah.
And then it was probably a battery system, I guess.
Oh, not yet in this time. It comes very much later. In 1996, I also invested in a wintertime electricity production. It is a small 5 kilowatt cogeneration machine. It runs with vegetable oil from sunflower, from rapeseed, from the farmer nearby. And so I can show since 30 years how to deal in the cold winter, German winter time, when we have only clouds and nearly no radiation, sun radiation. In 2020, I added to this both batteries, and batteries not only in my cellar. I have also a battery in my car, a Nissan Leaf. It can load bidirectional, and though I have big batteries in my house, 80 kilowatt hours together with the car and with the cellar, and I discussed with my grid operator, what should I do? I want to bring you only a little bit electricity. It is very few, and that is problematic. So plenty bureaucracy and others. And so we decided together, I cut off the grid.
So you cut off the grid in 2020?
Yes, in December 20, I cut off my grid connection.
Oh, that poor utility, I feel sorry for it, not getting your electricity.
Yes, that's a problem for the utilities. When the people make their electricity by themselves, the utilities cannot sell them.
So from 1991 to 2000, you were still connected to the grid?
Yes, I have a grid connection, but it is a easy thing. I can only switch, and then I'm back to the grid, but I never need it. I do not pay any grid bill and nothing. I have my heating, my electricity, my cars, everything on my house.
And so in 1991, when you first got your first solar system, they had regular grid tie inverters that didn't require batteries that you could get?
No, I did not need batteries. I had a converter, and this converted the electricity to the grid necessities on technology view, and I introduced to the grid everything.
Do you remember what brand the inverter was?
Yeah, it was SMA.
Oh, in 91. Okay, great.
Yes, it was one of the first of them. Yeah.
Like an SMA string inverter back in 91. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't know that they had SMA inverters that old, but I guess that would have been in the United States. I don't think you could get one that would work with our grid back in the early 90s like that. So that's pretty neat. All right, great.
Yeah. And in this time, we on the grassroots level with a lot of community power people and others, we looked for more solar. It is not enough when single people like myself and other ones bring solar electricity. We need a big and a huge market growth, that the same things happened, whatever happens when the products on new technologies come to an industry level, then the price will fall. We could see that in mobile phones, we could see that in laptops and in personal computers and others. In the 80s, most people did not believe that ever a personal computer will come to the world. And it will be too expensive. It is impossible, I was often told, to bring a personal computer to the world, to everyone. But you remember in the beginning of the 90s, a personal computer stood nearly in every house already, only 15 years later. So we could learn when we create an industry mass production that the price will fall. Oh, the price of solar will never fall. It is impossible. What a crazy man. He speaks of a cheap solar.
Yeah. So, and it was still sort of that way even, I don't know, 15 years ago. I think solar was more on the expensive end of electricity.
Today we have the social medias full of lies, and the lies are solar is too expensive and batteries are too expensive. The truth is solar is the cheapest option of renewable and of electricity at all, and together with wind power. And batteries are now very cheap and they will run very fast. That's the truth, but plenty of people will not believe it. But behind this lies and the misinformation stands the interest of the fossil and nuclear industry. In the 90s, the biggest company in Germany, electricity utility, it was Bayernwerk, they announced to the people more than 4% renewable electricity is on a technology view not possible in the grid. More than 4%. Today we have in Germany 60%. But they told to the people it is impossible on a technology view. And they do it until today to pollute the minds of the people, and the polluted minds of the people is protecting their business with oil, with gas, with coal and nuclear. That's the only interest behind that. And they do not pollute the mind of the people alone. They cover the media, they lobby and corrupt the politicians, and plenty other things happens in the world to protect the biggest business what we have, fossil and nuclear in the world, energy.
Do you think that will change now that solar and storage is the least expensive option, that they'll finally see that they can make more money using something that's less expensive?
It will change rapidly everywhere. Yeah. Even in US under Trump, who is the most in the time in the world now, who is thinking oil is the cheapest one, and we must protect oil business from renewable business, and therefore he will now cancel all the subsidizing, what is necessary. Yes, it will happen that we have a declining market and no industry in US with losing a lot of jobs and others. That will happen, yes. But he cannot stop the growth rates of renewables and solar in the world. And therefore, the world goes this way, and US will go back and back on industry level and other and job level. That will be the outcome of Trump's ideas and nothing else.
Yeah, it's hard to stop something that's like solar that's less expensive. And I don't like how when politicians and utilities make huge changes all at once, they want to go from like a 30% tax credit to zero. That'll just cause a whole bunch of jobs to get lost, and then eventually they'll come back. But it's just too drastic. I think they should do things 1% at a time if they are going to change them.
Yes, we will see in US that what happened in Germany. We should come back to the history of the Feed-in-Tariff, and we introduced it. And then you will see in the Germans' history, when a too hard cut on the supporting scheme, then we have a declining of the market. But it never happened that it collapsed the market, that it was completely stopped. And this is now much more faster with the growing, and the decline of the market will be much less than around 2012 in Germany, because now solar is much cheaper than in this time. And therefore, this ideas of Trump will only be a problem for the US industry, but not for the renewable energies by the whole. And it will be a problem for climate protection, because we must be much faster with the introduction of all renewables. We must come to 100% renewables. The best would be in 10 years globally and worldwide, because the drastic rising of the global temperature is so dangerous for everyone, with floods, with heat waves, with hunger, because of no earning any agriculture yields and plenty other things, and rising sea level. You know all this. It is so dangerous that we must much faster than to decline the growth rates. But come back to the history. In the 94, I was elected for councillor for my city. It is a small city, only 10,000 inhabitants, called Hammelburg. Hammelburg, yeah, in Franconia, in Bavaria. And in this city, together with the city Eising, they did it at the same time, we introduced the World Feed-in Tariff the first time on a local level. and we paid for a kilowatt hour solar 2 Deutsche Mark. This is about $1 for 1 kilowatt hour, and high price. And it was a revolution in this time. And we invested 15 kilowatt photovoltaic. Today, 15 kilowatt is ridiculous, but in this time it was a revolution. I made a forecast when every town and city and village in Germany would give this Feed-in-Tariff of 2 Deutsche Mark, then we would invest, with the example of Germany, 80 megawatt photovoltaics. We had a market in Germany of about 4 megawatt. And the people told me, he is crazy. 80 megawatt? How will it come? There are no factories here. No one will produce it. He is crazy.
And somebody probably already installed 80 megawatts today. So,
Yes. Yes.
and the first part you said 15 kilowatts. Was that, what was the first 15 kilowatts?
The 15 kilowatt was a program in Hammelburg, in my hometown.
Oh, it was the program.
Bought with a feed-in tariff with 2 Deutsche Mark per kilowatt hour.
Okay. And so that was the limit to how much they
Yeah,
would
that
do
was the limit because we could
in
not,
the whole city.
in a small town, we cannot create the whole industry what we need.
And some big houses probably have 15 kilowatts on them these days. So that's,
Big houses have now 20 or 30
Yeah.
kilowatts. Yeah.
that's amazing. And then maybe we should kind of explain what the feed-in tariff is. A lot of people call it a FIT. And my understanding is it's a 20-year contract to get paid a certain amount per kilowatt hour for the electricity.
It is not a contract. It is a law that forces the grid operator to pay to the feed-in solar this amount.
Okay.
They force by law the grid operators because the grid operators did not want to do that. Or we must make a law for that. And I learned with this situation in my hometown, I found it then I need to finance this 15 kilowatt. It was about 100,000 US dollar in this town. How to get 100,000 US dollars? The people told me, you are ridiculous. Never will you get this money. No one will pay for such an expensive. But we founded the first solar community in the world, collected this money in 1 year. And the people wanted to have climate protection and phase out nuclear and saw this opportunity and they supported us. And the more was, we had suddenly hundreds of other communities, and nearby in Bavaria, we created a big movement, a grassroots movement to do that. And this all together made me able to write a law for the German Bundestag, for the German parliament. In 1998, I was elected for the German Bundestag, for the Green Party, and my biggest wish was to make a law in the Bundestag with a feed-in tariff. The same figure like I ever hear in my life. Oh, it is ridiculous. The Bundestag will never accept such a law. It will be impossible. But I had friends, and from the Social Democratic Party, Hermann Scheer, unfortunately, he died in 2010. He and myself and some other parliamentarians wanted to have this law. I wrote the proposal. We discussed the proposal between the two parties. And in February 2000, the German Bundestag decided for this law against the big opposition of the coal, oil, gas, and nuclear industry. They fight it against the law, but we told them, we are the law makers, not the coal industry.
Good for you.
Yeah.
And then you did that with Hermann Scheer, who's another solar superhero. And yeah, it'd be interesting to just know about him too and how you started this law together, how it worked.
Yeah, we started to discuss this law in 1999. in springtime, and then we developed the law, and in February 2000 we decided with a majority in the German Bundestag. The conservatives and liberals did not vote for this law. The opposition leader in this time was the later Chancellor Merkel. She did not want to have this law. And we come back to this issue in 2010 and 12. She amended the law that we had this tremendous decline of the market in Germany.
So Merkel wasn't a friend of solar.
No, she was never a friend of
She
solar.
probably got some money from those utilities and oil companies.
Oil companies, utilities, coal companies, nuclear companies, everyone. They are the biggest lobbyists in the world, and they finance mostly politicians, and they have a big influence. So in the law 2000, we did not support only solar. We had also feed-in tariff for wind power, for hydropower, for bioenergy, mostly biogas, but also wood-fired electricity, and geothermal. Geothermal was not yet in the world. In Germany, no one electricity production with geothermal, but we introduced it in the law because we knew, we looked forward, we wanted to have 100% renewable system over all sectors, not only electricity, as well in heating, in cooling, in transport sector and in industry sector, everywhere. 100% renewables was our target. And we knew then we need a lot of amount of solar and wind, and they have big fluctuations depending from the weather and the time in the year, winter or summer times. And therefore, solar and wind is not everything. We need additional renewable energy as well, especially in the German cold winter time with a lot of clouds. Then we have a lot of rain, and then the hydropower will bring a lot of electricity. In wintertime, we have more wind than in summertime, and then the wind power will bring electricity. And the bioenergy with biogas and with vegetable oil and with others, what I have in my cellar, the vegetable oil, this is a stored energy. We can cut the biomass in summertime, bring it to the winter time, and then we use it with cogeneration for heating and electricity production. And geothermal is the same. You can use it all over the year. It is not depending on the weather. Therefore, we must include this. All renewable energies, solar and wind, will bring in a 100% renewable system 80 till 90%. But the rest, 10-15%, must come from the rest. And it is very important because when you make it only with storages, then you have a finance problem and a problem with infrastructure in the grid and plenty others. Therefore, batteries and hydropump power stations and other storage systems are very important to add it together with the mix of all renewable energies. And this is what we wanted to implement. In the year 2000, we did not yet support with the feed-in tariff a storage system. But we had already discussion in 2002 and 2003. We wanted to make a feed-in tariff only for storage system. But unfortunately, in 2004, we had the decision of the Chancellor Schröder to stop this coalition, and then we had no chance. We got a new coalition in 2005 with Chancellor Merkel. Social Democrats with Hermann Scheer were included, and he was the man now in the new majority of the parliament who stood for the renewable energies. We Greens were in the opposition. I was still in the parliament until 2013, but I had no influence from the opposition role. Hermann Scheer had an influence, but he died in 2010, and beginning from 2010, then we had the government under Chancellor Merkel a lot of amending of this feed-in tariff that was only worse. And first it was in solar. We had in 2012 an investment of 7 gigawatt. This means 7,000 megawatts photovoltaic in 1 year. You remember 80 megawatt seemed to be impossible 10 years ago, was me told. But it was a success story. We had new companies and plenty others, and 12 gigawatt yearly investment. And in Germany stood the biggest factories, Solon, SolarWorld, others.
Yeah, they talk about Solar Valley comparing to Silicon Valley, and I believe it was former East Germany.
Yes, it is.
And it was like really good for the economy there.
Yes, it was really good for the economy. We could create with the industry and together with the installation companies, they are mostly smaller ones, we had 200,000 jobs in solar industry in Germany. And that's what we wanted to have. And this amending of the law was done under Chancellor Merkel to cut the feed-in tariff too hard. And this declined the market within 2 years from 7 gigawatt to 1 gigawatt. In 2012, under the 10 biggest solar companies in the world were 8 Germans. We lost all these companies. They went bankrupt because of the declining of the home market. Today, under the 50 biggest solar companies in the world is no German one. That's the result of opposing solar industry.
Yeah, and also the sudden changes, it sounds like, too, that what you said. What was the numbers again? It was just in 1 year?
1 year investment, 12 gigawatt in 2012, 1 gigawatt in 2014.
So it went down to 1/12 of what it was before.
Yes. And in other sectors, we had the same. The main principle is the discussion what we have everywhere in the world. The market must decide what we have to do. The market is the frame what we need. And the renewable energies must stay themselves in the market. You hear this sentence everywhere in the world, in every political speech, in every commentary from newspapers and so on. What is a market in energy? The market is a high subsidized fossil and nuclear, where fossil and nuclear do not pay their damaging costs, what they cause on climate protection, on health, and on polluting the environment and everything. Huge public costs, and they don't pay it. And in this market, the renewable energies should stay by themselves. It is impossible in such a high subsidized market. But now you see why this frame is, they should stay in the market. It is to protect the fossil and nuclear business, nothing else. And this discussion lead to convert the framework situation. The feed-in tariff, what we introduced in 2000, was the situation that the parliament decided the amount of the feed-in tariff and the grid operators have to pay it. Now they switched it to the so-called auctioning system. This means the economic ministry makes an announcement, an auctioning, for a new period to invest in solar and in wind power. This means they do not allow an exponential growth rate, what is typical for markets. They limit the growth, what they want, a limitation. And then they tell, it is limited, yes, but they who want to have it, they must compete under us, and who brings the cheapest feed-in tariff, he gets the license to build up. This was stopping the increasing rates, and with it, it was stopping the innovation increasing, because the innovation is combined only with market growth. And the faster the market grows, the faster the price goes down and the innovation will come. And the auctioning system has another influence. It is possible to take part on an auctioning system only with a high financial background. In Germany, 70% of the renewable energies until 2015 was invested not from rich people, not from finance structures, not from utilities and others. It was invested by private people, by farmers, by companies, new companies who were never before that in the market with community power. 70% by private people, not utilities. And this group of investors could not take part on the hurdles of the new auctioning system. And this is a most important background why the investment was so radically went down. And it was not only in solar. In 2016, the auctioning system was introduced for biogas, and then the biogas market in Germany collapsed by the whole. We have nearly nothing new investment into biogas. And in 2018, the auctioning system was introduced for wind power. In 2017, we had 5.5 gigawatt new investment. 1 year later, we had less than 1 gigawatt investment. So you see, the fossil and nuclear industry was able to influence the politicians with their ideas, go to market, make a market-based auctioning system, and then they earn that what they want, and drastic decline of renewable investment because the decentralized actors could not take part. And that's what they feared the most, because what we discussed before, I do not pay for electricity to any utility. I make my electricity by myself, and I do not have any grid bill. And that's what they fear. When they have no selling their energy to the consumers, then they lose their business. And they need, it is a necessity that they lose their business because they pollute with the business, the climate, the environment, the health, and everything else. Therefore, we must finish it very, very fast and come back to the decentralized business. But we had in this time, around 2010 and 12, another situation. I was often in the world. Together with Hermann Scheer, we were around the world. We were in the parliaments. I was in US Congress in 2018 with Jay Inslee. He invited me.
Oh, great.
And I told him how to create a feed-in-tariff law. And he formulated one for US, and nearly, it was short before the end of this period, and he was unlucky because he could not bring the majority. Then US would have a feed-in tariff, like German example with Jay Inslee. He was very strong behind it. But we had other nations in Europe. I was in Spain and I was in Greece and in other countries, and I talked to the parliamentarians and they introduced it. And I was often in China. I went to the German-Chinese friendship group, parliamentarian group in the German parliament, and so I often had contact with Chinese delegations in Berlin, in the Bundestag, or I had some journeys to China with a group, and I had conversation with ministers and with parliamentarians from the National People's Volkskongress and others. And the Chinese people, they heard exactly to us. They wanted to hear about that. And then they decided for a feed-in tariff for all renewable energies. In 2008 for wind power, in 2012 for solar power. The most important motivation for them was they want to have a blue sky in Beijing and in Shanghai. You remember in this time it was everywhere polluted because of the coal power stations from Siemens and because of the diesel cars from Volkswagen and others. Our German polluting technology polluted China. And they want to have a clean environment. And yes, they want to be the market leader in the world with the new clean technologies. And therefore invested in batteries and solar and wind and others.
Great. Yeah. And I was just in Shanghai at this big SNEC conference. I just got back. In fact, I'm a little bit jet lagged here. And I was noticing just like on the main streets of Shanghai, you couldn't hear an internal combustion engine. There would be like rush hour, and you couldn't hear those little explosions happening because it was all electric and you didn't smell the smoke. And it wasn't too long ago that I was in Shanghai and it was like you couldn't see the sky. And it was very polluted. Yeah, just like you couldn't breathe on the streets. It was unhealthy to take a walk.
And this shows it can go in 10 years. 1 decade is a normal period for revolutionary new industry, for the internet, for the personal computers, mobile phones, everything. It took only 10 years. And renewable energies could cover the world in 10 years. Then we have no obstruction of that, but supporting of that. But we see everywhere in the world now, especially mostly in US with President Trump, we have more obstruction than supporting. Only in very few countries, and the only country, no, not the only, we have very few others as well, like Costa Rica, very successful, Uruguay, very successful, Kenya in Africa. But from the big nations is only China, the successful nation.
Yeah, and China is really installing a lot of solar.
Yes. China, you should remember, we introduced in Germany increasing rates in solar with 20% every year, more than the year before. Exponential growth rates. But these growth rates were cut in 2012, what I told you. When we would have gone with the increasing of solar and wind and others ongoing, then we would stay since 5 years at 100% renewable electricity in Germany. China has since 25 years, since 2000, increasing rates in wind power of 40% per year.
Wow.
25 years long. And in solar, it's nearly similar. So you see, an industry can do it when the political willingness is there. And now the people are crying in Germany, oh, we have no industry, we lost our solar industry. They did it themselves under Chancellor Merkel. And they cry, oh, we must fear that the Chinese cover our wind business and wind industry. And, oh, unfortunately, we cannot make an industry with batteries. Yes, China did it. And Europe and US wanted to protect the combustion engines to pollute the environment and the health and protect the business of the fossil industry, Volkswagen and Daimler and plenty others and Ford and all together. Only Tesla was in the Western Hemisphere the company who made a very positive impact for that. We must not speak why Tesla is declining. It is not because of the technology, but it is the supporting of Elon Musk to Trump.
Yep.
Therefore, it declines very fast. People don't like such supporting for right politicians. And now China comes not only with e-cars, solar, wind, and batteries. China comes now with other new technologies. I see it now in chemistry system, for example, with plastics from greens, from plants, or from algae. That's what we need because the plastic pollutes the oceans. The plastic pollutes over burning the plastic pollution, and then it comes as carbon dioxide to the atmosphere and plenty others. So we see everywhere clean revolutions. And I'm so sad to see that only China adopted this industry revolution and not Europe and not US. Under Biden, with the Inflation Reduction Act, there was a good pathway that US could cover and bring back some of this technology. We have a huge amount of wind investment in US and also of solar. We have some states who support it very good, New York State, California, Minnesota, or others. But we have some states who forbid it. Florida, for example, forbid it to bring wind power stations on public ground. Crazy. They want to pollute more, and now Miami is soon under sea level. And we have in summertime sea temperatures on Miami strands that no one can have a bath in it. 38 degrees and more. Who will bath in 38 degrees? Wow. It is incredible and very fast. And in Florida, the governor forbids wind power the solution for that, and he want to forbid solar power and others. I cannot understand such a thinking.
Well, I think, though, thanks to you and the feed-in tariff, it pretty much brought the price of solar from being the most expensive form of electricity to the least expensive form of electricity. And economics now is driving it forward. And, it'd be nice to make it happen overnight like we want it to happen. But we'll get there. It's just a matter of how long, and, it's like what kind of damage it will do to the climate and pollution and all that. But I just really want to point out to people that the feed-in tariff that you started pretty much made solar affordable. Like, it went from being really expensive to like over 10 times less expensive. And that's because there was some money there to pretty much prime the pump to get manufacturing up to scale to make it so PV, what used to be, like $10 a watt to buy the solar modules, even more, maybe somewhere around $10 a watt when you started the feed-in tariff, or between 5 and 10, to now. I remember reading an article in PV Magazine not too long ago that somebody was complaining that the price of PV was going to go back up to 12 cents a watt. And so we're going to get there, and now it's the least expensive. And so all those arguments against solar being more expensive are just invalid, thanks to the feed-in tariff.
Solar and batteries will become so cheap that you must pay nearly nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, compared to what it used to be, we're pretty much there.
Look to the reports of Rethink X from Tony Seba. He wrote a new book, and he showed us a vision that we come to the century where energy is costless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have a lot of the silicon crystals over my head right now were free. They were just used solar modules that people were, replacing with the new systems, and they just wanted to get rid of them. And it's like, I'll take them. They make great kilowatt hours.
Yeah, and this is not only for your refrigerator and your cooking in your house. It is also for your cars. You must not drive to a gasoline station to pay a lot of gasoline and a lot of money. No, you take your electricity from your roof. It's costless.
Yeah, I'm plugged in right now to that array, to those crystals.
Yeah. So that's a vision, and the vision is already spread over the world. We have it often. My cars are driving only with my electricity, except of when I'm 100 kilometers away and I need a fast charging station, or 300 kilometers away and I need a fast charging station to come back or drive more. Then I cannot connect with my house. That's clear. Therefore, that's an example why we need a grid. But we must feed up the grid with the cheapest energy. And that's solar and battery and wind power and generation with bioenergy in wintertime as well. And not with gas power station, with nuclear power. Nuclear power is so expensive. And you should learn nuclear power. Now we have also the decision against in US and everywhere. The newest nuclear power station in France, France makes 60% of the electricity with nuclear. And the new nuclear power station Flamanville in France produce the electricity with 17 cents per kilowatt hour. Solar is 2 cents per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
70 cents. The number is not from EDF, the company. They did not allow it. It is from the finance, from the official finance court from France. They told that, and they warned President Macron to make new plans for nuclear power because it would destroy only the public budget.
I was also wondering about nuclear. Has anybody started a nuclear weapons program in the last 50 years that didn't start with saying, oh, we're just making clean energy?
Yes, it was the first program in US. Dwight Eisenhower, he announced Atoms for Peace. In reality, it was a program, Atoms for Wars.
Yeah. And then there's also the problem with the leftovers. So I always ask people like, well, how long do you have to bury it before it's safe?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how long has this planet been around?
Yeah, we had in US wonderful development long before Germany under Jimmy Carter. Perhaps you remember.
Yeah.
He gave the first supporting for renewable energies, and the first wind powers in California was built up. And he made a solar system on the White House in Washington and others. But Ronald Reagan destroyed everything. He canceled it. And Jimmy Carter, a very wise president, he told, we want to have peace for US. This comes only with renewable energies to become independent from oil, gas, coal, and uranium.
Yeah.
And when we look now to the world, where the oil comes from, there is a war. Russia, Near East, Sudan, and plenty other regions. Oil is making wars.
I think they say that the U.S., the military is larger than all other countries combined, and it's kind of just keeping that oil flowing. You know, it's quite a subsidy.
And it was Ronald Reagan. He told, go away with the bullshit of renewables. We will save our energy by military. So that was a seed for the oil wars in the world. When Jimmy Carter would have a second period, I think we would have a much more peaceful world.
Yeah, rest in peace. It's amazing he got to be the oldest ever president, made it to 100. So another superhero besides yourself.
It was really honoring for myself. The biggest donated environmental prize in the world comes from Hong Kong. It was given only 5 years long. And Jimmy Carter and myself, we both were one of the awarders. Louis J. Wu Prize.
Okay, Louis J. We'll put this in the show notes about the prize. And did you ever meet Jimmy Carter?
No, unfortunately not. He was awarded 1 year before me. So I wanted to come with him together over this awarding, but then happened terrible, the revolution or the peace and freedom movement and democratic movement in Hong Kong was destroyed. And this was also the end of this pricing award systems.
Gee, that's too bad. Yeah.
Yeah, that was very bad. And then I had no chance to come in contact with him and others.
Okay. All right. So how about the things that you're doing now? Like, I know that you are the president of the Energy Watch Group, and I think you're involved with the Clean Tech Business Club and probably a lot of other things.
No, it's too much what I'm doing. So
well, thanks for taking the time
for that all, but fortunately I'm free. I have a good prize award, and therefore I'm good financed. That's a good basic for that, and so I can do a lot. And so I can speak over some things. In Germany, I work mostly to bring back the community power, that the people can create their own energy by themselves and share it with their neighbors and others. Energy sharing and self-production, that's what I support and what we want to bring forward. On an international level, I have a new project. It is very first in the beginning. We want to bring to Ukraine decentralized renewable energies, because it is in the wartime the only secure energy for the people. You see the Russians attack the big power stations and the big grids, and they can destroy the energy distribution of the Ukrainians. But when the Ukrainians have it on their rooftops and have it in their rivers and the wind power and the batteries and everything else decentralized with millions productions, then they have secure energy, even in a wartime. Yeah. That's what we want to bring, and we have a lot of mayors and people and NGOs behind us, and we hope we can do it. And the third big thing is we look not only to energy. Renewable energy is the most important contribution to climate protection, because 100% renewables would cut 60% of the carbon, methane, and other climate gas emissions in the world. 60%. So therefore, 100% renewables is the most important pillar for climate protection, but it is not everything. We have then even 40% emissions still from the fossil system, for example, for fossil-based plastics and plenty others, or cement or steel production and more. And we have emissions from the agriculture system with high intensive agriculture that pollutes the environment, pollutes the health and pollutes the climate. We must go to an agriculture system that is healthy and that is clean. And this is a system where the plants take out the carbon from the atmosphere and store it in the soil to make humus, a more fertilized soil. This is carbon thinking. But when we look to the necessity, what we need for the whole world to really protect from climate protection, we have now increasing rates of the temperature. They are exponential. We look to the last 20 years, exponential growth rates, and nearly everyone is astonished we stay at 1.5 degrees global warming. When we go on with this growth rates, we will have 2 degrees in 2032. It is terrible for the world, for the humankind. It destroys more than was what will then happen. Therefore, we cannot wait. The climate boundary for a stable climate is under 350 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Today we have 430. This means we must come back under 350 parts per million. How can we do it? 100% renewables helps to stop 60% of emissions. Clean material helps to stop the other emissions. But then we stay on 430 parts per million. Yes, green agriculture, biologic, organic agriculture can bring down from the atmosphere a small part, per 40 gigatons per year. That's not enough. We must go to the sea, to the ocean, to create huge areas with macroalgae. That's a project what I'm working. We need to go to the oceans to seed algae, huge amounts, and algae take out carbon from the atmosphere when they grow, like plants on the earth. And algae can grow with a doubling rate of 10 days.
Mm-hmm. That's faster than the solar industry grew when you started the Feed-in-Tariff.
Much faster. Then, and the algae, then we can take for new material, for building houses, for making bioplastics, for create a fuel for the airplanes, and carbon sinking fuel, not a carbon polluting fuel and everything. So that's a project what I'm working on. We call this program Holocene project. Go back with humankind to the Holocene time. We exceeded already Holocene. We stay at 1.5 degrees, and plenty regions in the world are already today uninhabitable, and much more will follow, heat waves and plenty others. And therefore, we must come back to Holocene. I hope that we can find philanthropes, companies and others who have money to finance this research. Then, because we must know, no one described the world until today, even not the IPCC, how to come back under 350 parts per million. And we want to describe that on a scientific university level, and we know how to do it, but we need about $20 million to finance this research. And when anyone wants to help that, we would be very happy. And then we could describe a world that not only stops the temperature growth, that declines the temperature.
Okay. And so that's $20 million to do some global cooling. And by the way, global cooling is the name of Hans-Josef Fell's book that everyone should read. And $20 million, it might sound like a lot for one person, but that's actually very little for a lot of people. It's not even a rounding error for a lot of the things that happen, with governments and corporations and things like that. So I'll try to come up with that 20 million
That's not really plenty. When I look to the money that flows to the craziest energy, there are some people who believe that nuclear fusion will be a future for the world. And they bring money now, and startup got 100 million money for nuclear fusion for one startup. This startup will never create any energy. It is ridiculous to speak about that. Never. We did it in 70 years to support nuclear fusion, and no one knows how to create any 1 kilowatt hour. So therefore, it is not a lot. We need only 20 million, and then we would know how to go to a world that is a world that cool down the temperature.
And so the project that you're working on with the research is how to seed the algae in the ocean and harvest it and turn it into fuels and plastics and things?
That's one of the things. The modeling what we have bring all the things together. 100% renewables on every place of the world at every hour of the year. A clean circular economy with not polluting with plastics and others. An agriculture and forestry system that brings down the carbon from the atmosphere to soil and to plants and to the ocean, to bring the algae to the ocean and to create huge amount of carbon things. We must take out 450 gigatons carbon from the atmosphere. That's the amount what we emitted since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago. And that's the necessity what we have to do. And we want to describe all the together things for that idea.
Great. Yeah, and when people talk about increasing global temperatures by 2 degrees, I always have to correct them when they're in the United States because that's Celsius and everybody talks about Fahrenheit, and it's a lot worse in Fahrenheit. It's 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit for every 1 degree Celsius in change. So 2 times 1.8 is 3.6. So almost 4 degrees Fahrenheit is the increase in the temperature that people are kind of already giving up on and saying like, oh, we're going to increase the temperature by this much. And that's huge, especially when you talk about, melting ice. And it's kind of crazy that people are just kind of resigned to that and think that 1.8 degree or 1 degree Celsius, 1.8 Fahrenheit is like, oh, we'll never even get there. And you have a plan to bring it down to 0.
The temperature grows to 0, not the temperature.
Oh, yeah, not
for us.
Yeah, the big ice ball. I should say that the increase in temperature of the whole entire planet from what it would have been without humans in the Industrial Revolution and burning fossil fuels.
Our hope is to decline today's temperature by 1 degree Celsius.
Yep. And would that get us back to, say, the 1950s or the 1900s?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and you keep hearing them say the hottest 10 years on record were the last 10 years, and they just keep saying that over and over again.
Yeah. Back to the last 10 years when and would be hopeful to have it not stronger, but it will become much, much harder, much hotter, and much more terrible accidents like wood fires and floods. And in US what that means. You know that the tornadoes becomes more and more. Now Mexico is under a very terrible hurricane yet at the moment in these hours. You know what that means when the temperature goes. And it will grow very fast, very, very rapidly.
Yeah, and just like I think people will really notice it when the sea level goes up, meters, things like that, which could just be a quick chain reaction, just kind of happen really quick.
At the moment we see when we do not stop and decline the world temperature, that the sea level will grow so fast that after 2050, in 20 years, parts of New York, of Miami, Los Angeles, and others down underwater.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Shaun White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Shaun White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Shaun White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show. And so in your book, Global Cooling, you talk about how to, actually cool off the planet instead of heat it up and be satisfied with just 2 degrees Celsius and all kinds of species dying off and coral reefs disappearing and all that, and the sea level rising. I've thought before too about, we take all this oil out of the ground. What if we just made something like ethanol and filled those oil wells back up? That would be putting the carbon back to where it came from. That would be one way of doing it.
The question, where comes the ethanol from? When it's ethanol from the fossil industry, it pollutes the same like oil directly. When you take the ethanol in an organic agriculture from farmland, then you have carbon sinks and you have a fuel that can replace oil with climate protection. Even with carbon sinking, not only with emission-free. It is not emission-free because the ethanol, when you burn it in the machines, it emits carbon dioxide, but this carbon dioxide will be captured by the plants in the next summer period, and they take it out from the atmosphere again. So therefore it is a circle of carbon with plants, but only when you do not make it in an intensive agriculture. So when you have mineral fertilizer, when you have pesticides on it, they are coming from oil and other fossil materials, then you pollute the environment.
Yep. Okay. So where do you see the future going? Like how long until we get to 0 degree temperature rise?
First, the positive message is the future will be only renewable because we have so cheap energy with renewables that it will change the world. But the way to this point takes too long in the necessity what we need for the climate protection. We stay at 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming. This is already too much. And when we go on emitting like the last 10 years, we will stay at 2 degrees Celsius global warming in 2032. That's terrible for the world. That means, on the other side, we must create zero emissions within 1 decade and combined with huge amounts of carbon sinks, that we come down with a concentration of climate gases in the atmosphere, down from 430 parts per million today, under 350, better is 330 or 300 parts per million. We could do it. The possibility is there in the world, but we can do it only when every people works on this plan and no one who is a saboteur. And the saboteur is the fossil industry with their interest to sell oil, gas, coal for energy and chemistry system. This must be completely cancelled. The money what they earn should they invest only Shell, BP, Exxon and all the brands what we know. They should invest everything only in renewables to save their business. When they do not go this way, they go bankrupt. And it is fast to see that they go bankrupt because people can make their energy much cheaper now themselves. They do not need utilities and no oil companies with the new technologies. They must learn this lesson and help the humankind to save the humankind society altogether in the world.
Yeah, I've always thought that oil companies would be the best at actually converting over and building giant solar projects all at once. They're really good at building lots of infrastructure. I could imagine just like if all the oil companies just focused for 1 year on building solar projects instead of doing what they're doing and pumping all that oil, That would be huge. We could probably double the amount of solar in the world just in a year if they did that.
Yes, we can do that. Some of the oil companies indeed invest in big solar and wind utilities. For example, Total in France or in Italy. But they invest as well into gas, natural gas, into fossil oil, into coal, into nuclear, and others. As long as they invest only $1 in the polluting system, it is only greenwashing what they are doing with solar panels. They must stop completely, immediately the investment into fossil. Only then we can accept that they are on the way to climate protectors.
Yeah, and it's tempting for a lot of people, like especially people that live in the parts of the Middle East where there's a lot of oil, like Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and all that. It's kind of amazing to go over there to see how much money they have. The people there are so rich from selling their oil to us, and we're giving them all kinds of money so we can fill up our SUVs and big cars and put all that money out of our exhaust pipes and into building, the tallest buildings in the world in a super hot place where it's pretty much unlivable without using lots of air conditioning. It's just like hot like Phoenix, Arizona, like 110 degrees Fahrenheit or something like 104.5 degrees Celsius, something in there. It's just kind of crazy. And then there's, all these weapons going to all these places to kind of, they call it keeping peace in the Middle East.
Yes, they earn a lot of money with the business of oil, gas, and coal. And they believe they could overlive in a situation with the hot earth, but they will not overlive. That's clear, because I was in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai, and I could see that the sea level is nearly at the houses. When the sea level is 1 meter higher, Dubai and Abu Dhabi has gone. Perhaps they can drive with the ships between their houses. Cannot imagine that. And it will destroy it because, when a big erosion, marine waves comes, and at any time the houses will collapse. So it will not really help. And they cannot overlive in such a town with 55 degrees temperature over day and 40 during night. It is too hot. When they have not energy because any of the storms destroyed their energy production, then they will die because they have no refrigerators. So they cannot overlive. They must learn this lesson that even the richest, yes, perhaps they can overlive some years longer than the rest of the poorest people, or some decades, perhaps, but they cannot overlive but the whole at all.
Yeah, it's interesting over there too that most of the people that are living there aren't citizens. So there are a lot of people from, like India, Philippines, North Africa that are doing all the work. And the people that live there are, they're just so rich that a lot of them don't need to work. And they have like special rights. And the people that are living there from other places have a lot less rights, we could say. And they're out there working in the hot heat. Some of them are dropping dead from all the heat. But, I have done some work over there, and everybody in the world is, there's nice people everywhere in every industry. But, we need to stop those fossil fuels from burning up our skies. One of the things that I think about too when I'm in Dubai is I kind of have a thought that it's going to be a ghost town someday.
Yeah, they will become ghost towns. We will see a lot of died people. First, the poorest one. They cannot protect them from heat waves. They are the first to have not enough to eat because of the declining harvests. And later, the rich people will have the same.
One thing that I've noticed about, renewable energy now being the least expensive option, and then a lot of times politics gets so polarized that we see people saying, well, the right says this and the left says that. And so even though, renewable energy makes economic sense, it makes sense in every different way. you'll see some people saying like, well, I don't want to do renewable energy because those people are want to take away my guns and do abortions and things like that. How could we separate out that kind of polarizing politics, or can we, do you think?
The misinformation is organized all over the world. We have the network of institutes, so-called research institutes, 600, called the Atlas network. A lot of institutes in Germany, in US, and everywhere else.
What was that again? The what institute?
Atlas network.
Atlas. ATLAS? Okay.
ATLAS. You will not really find it in the internet or anywhere else. But we have research how this Atlas network is financed and influence media's politics and others. And this Atlas network brings the frames, what I told about in the beginning. We must go to the market-driven, climate warming is not humankind, it is natural, or renewable energies are too expensive, they cannot bring baseload. All these arguments, the frames, are driven by this institute's medias, and mostly over social medias, in TikTok and in others. They spread it everywhere. We must win the majority in the media spreads, in social medias and everywhere, like you do it. You are in social medias with your podcast. And with your podcast, you bring the truth to the people and not the lies to them. But we need much, much more such social medias and medias over this situation. What is a necessity in the world and what are the possibilities? And the possibility is clear. 100% renewables in 1 decade is not a question of financing or technology. It is only the question of political willingness.
Yeah, one of the things that you see is we always seem to exceed our expectations globally with, how much solar is installed and things like that. So that's pretty positive. I always like to think positively. There's a lot that we have to do to scare people into being positive just to make it happen. But I think that we'll get there. The question is, will we get there soon or will we wait too long and make it even more expensive?
Yeah, the wonderful situation with technology revolutions is the more we produce, the cheaper they become. It happens in batteries, in solar, in wind power, in e-cars, and in other situations. And the polluting technologies, the more you produce, the more expensive they become. You see it in combustion cars. The most expensive are the German combustion cars, the big ones from Volkswagen or from Daimler, from BMW and others. Or you see the same in nuclear power. The more you invest, the more the energy will become expensive. And you see it as well in fossil. The more you drill out, the less you have in your oil fields, and then it becomes more expensive. You see it at the moment because before the war of Israel and Iran, the oil price dropped down and down and down. We were already under $60 the barrel. And when it is under $70 the barrel, more and more oil fields cannot produce economically oil. Therefore, we have at the moment in US a sharp decline of oil drilling. It is because of the cheap price. Now the war rises the oil price and they can come back. So therefore, it is clear when you drill more oil and more, then it will become cheaper and cheaper, the oil, because you have an overflow of the oil. The world does not need so plenty. And then the companies will go bankrupt because it cannot be refinanced their oil drilling. That's in natural gas the same, it is in coal the same, it is in uranium the same, everywhere the same. So there are limited resources. And thanks to China with the electric car, we had a sharp declining of the oil price in the time before the Israel-Iranian war. And because of the electric cars, they replaced combustion cars with oil, and this declined the oil price in the world. And this will go on. We stay at the beginning of that revolution. It will go much faster in the next years. And when Trump will try to stop this, yes, he can try it in US by law and forbid electric cars, perhaps. He can do it. But what does it mean for the world? The Brazilians, the Indonesians, the Europeans will not forbid electric cars. And then China will cover all these nations, will bring more and more cheaper and more economic and more innovative cars. And at the end, the US car manufacturers cannot compete on the world market. They lose every other market. In Germany, we have this situation already. Volkswagen, one of the biggest company in the world with cars, they run nearly only with combustion cars. They had 40 factories in China. Now the Chinese don't want the Volkswagen cars, not the combustion ones, and not the electric ones, because the Chinese, much cheaper, more innovative Volkswagen lost this strategy already.
Yeah, when I was just over there taking Ubers and different cars, they're all electric and they seem very high tech with like just kind of looking at the displays and the cameras and things like that. It seemed like they had options that we don't have when we're driving around. And I have an electric car also, but it just seemed pretty modern. And I think a lot of people don't realize that and they think, oh, we're the most modern country and we're the best and we're number one. And we don't see that kind of stuff happening. But also, I think it's a good thing. And I want to encourage China to keep it up and keep innovating and, having electric cars and installing more solar than any other country in the world. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are, but China might install like half the solar in the world these days. And that was what Germany was doing when I started teaching solar classes in 2008 and those years in there. And we would say how Germany has half the solar in the world in a place where the insolation, that's the incident solar radiation or just the solar resource, what's coming out of the sun in those areas was, one of the darker places. And it wasn't like half is dark, it wasn't half the energy of Phoenix. So there's still solar radiation, but it was closer to 1,000 kilowatt hours per year per kilowatt installed than 2,000. And usually most places in the world are between 1,000 and 2,000, unless maybe you're up in Alaska somewhere. But it's pretty awesome to be able to talk to you, the person that pretty much started this and brought up the economies of scale and primed the pump by inventing the feed-in tariff, also known as the FIT. It's created probably my job and a lot of other jobs by just getting the industry going. I remember working in Ontario, Canada around the year 2010, 2009, and there was a huge FIT boom there when they had 80.2 cents per kilowatt hour for PV systems that were 10 kilowatts and smaller. And so those ones that were installed in 2010, they're going to be getting that price until 2030. It was a 20-year contract. So thanks for doing that, Hans-Josef Fell.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to this. I wanted to have the solar and the other renewables in the world, and I worked on it since the 70s of the last century. It was a very, very hard work and a strong work, but it was also a wonderful work because every time I could see the people who did not believe on it, they could see every year, yes, it will come. It will become much cheaper. It will become a big industry. It will replace the old system. And that's what I see and I love to see.
And I believe you started off as a school teacher. Is that right?
Yes, I taught on the school physics and sports, and I could see that pupils are very interested in the new technologies in solar and renewable energies. And I teached not only that, everything I teached in physics. And in sports, I could see a lot of young people, they had problems with your lungs because of air pollution and others. And so I combined this both. I want to have clean air. This is solar instead of coal and gas.
So I was thinking to inspire people that they can change their careers and things like that. When is it that you went from being a school teacher to, I guess your next job might have been like a Green Party politician?
I was a green politician on local level since the 80s. And I was elected to my hometown, my region for the local parliaments. And in 1998, I was elected for the German parliament. This was then the basic for me to write and introduce this feed-in-tariff law.
So how old were you when you came up with the feed-in tariff?
It was 1998. I was 46 years old.
So 46 years old. So anybody that's under 46 years old, you have no excuse to go out there and change the world and bring down the temperature by multiple degrees. It's all up to you. So make it happen. No excuses. All right. So let's see, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about today?
Oh, I think we talked over a lot of
Okay, great.
wonderful and normal
We went
things.
for a long time, so thank you so much. And I also wanted to thank Tomas of the Clean Tech Business Club of introducing us at that dinner where we both showed up early and I sat right by you over there in Munich. And that was a great time. And so I hope to see you more and want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. But most of all, to thank you for changing the world, making a huge difference and showing everybody else that they too can make a huge difference in the world and making it so almost single-handedly, you made it so solar went from being the most expensive technology to make energy to the least expensive. So thank you so much, Hans-Josef Fell.
Thank you, Son. It is a pleasure. And thanks for listening to Sang White's Solar Podcast.